Today, you are joining the discussion not because of your nationalities, but rather because all of you are experts in the field. So we want to have analysis from experts. Let me begin with you, Mr. Paul. One after another provocations, all sides against it. What do you make of the intention DPRK's latest move?
Well, it appears that there are two driving factors. One is there's been a steady high pace of testing of missiles, suggesting that the drive to achieve an offensive capability is very important in the minds of the leadership in the North Korean capital. Secondly, we've had the once again the resumption of American and South Korean military exercises, to which the North has traditionally tried to express its opposition through one or another activities such as missile tests, as we saw today. So I think this is a continuation of those two factors. Of course, this is also happening in the context of a Korean election that's about to begin with the prosecution of the current Korean president, and that is going to put the political focus on the need for the THAAD missile system in South Korea to defend against these provocative new capabilities from North Korea, all of which embroil the U.S. and China in this regional political problem.
Mr. Walsh, from your perspective, do we have to wait until the tension further escalate? Can China's call of so-called make everybody, all players, peace restraint, be able to work?
Well, I would hope so, but I must say I'm a bit skeptical about it, if only because right now, even though these actions are typical of North Korea, as my colleague has just said, typical in that they've had this ongoing testing program and in response to these exercises, but it's atypical. It's a very different situation. We are, in the last couple of weeks, we've had several events in which China and North Korea have been arguing and had some difficult words for one another. And so while the tests are normal, the U.S. DPRK relationship is somewhat under some strain right now. And of course, we have a president in the White House, a new president, who doesn't really have his national security team together, and probably doesn't know a lot about North Korea. So the idea that we're all going to be restrained, maybe, I hope so, but I would say the conditions are not there for that. We have poor relations between almost everyone involved.
That's very true. Senior Captain Zhang, one of the things of biggest concern is exactly at what level the North Koreans have been doing their nuclear test. ICBM, that's what they are really aiming at, which could threaten the United States, and of course putting the all Asia-Pacific region into turmoil, which is already beginning. What can China do really at this point? China earlier already have some ban on the coal imports coming from North Korea, even though North Korean economists deny it's having a big impact, but all signs are pointing to the fact that it is having some impact.
Well, I think China has done its best to calm down the tensions on the Korean Peninsula.
Really? Has it been calmed down?
No, I don't think so, because there are several factors. One is the North Korean side, one is the South Korea and the United States side. On the South Korean side and also the United States side, they see that the North Koreans are constantly making provocations against the South. But to the North Koreans, they think that also the United States and South Koreans are making provocations against North Korea. For instance, this round of large-scale joint military exercises are aimed at overthrowing the government of North Korea. That is a regime
change. But how is this vicious cycle likely to be stopped? That is really the biggest strategic question, isn't it? I mean, Mr. Paul, security in exchange for not testing nuclear, that used to be the belief we have about DPRK, which many still thought that could be a possibility. To what extent do you think that all the latest development, like it or not, could speed up the current White House coming up with real strategies, at least the American version, about the crisis?
Well, very early in the introduction of the Trump administration, they've instructed the bureaucracies, yes, they've just instructed the bureaucracies to Defense Department, other State Department, to come up with options for what to do, a range of options from the most pacific to the most horrific, to see what a new administration needs to consider to do, given the pattern of provocation and has been unbroken going into this new administration. My fear has been that this will come earlier than the administration is ready for it, and we'll end up with less than the option that we can best deploy. Having said that, all the options look bad right now. It's very hard to say here's a way forward that will bring back stability to the the Korean Peninsula as long as the North Korean regime exists. Right. So we're getting to the point where there are existential decisions to be made about the future of North Korea. China has a very difficult time addressing those. The U.S. also has a difficult time addressing them because any kind of use of force on the peninsula puts at risk many civilians in South Korea. So we, as I say, we have many bad options before our governments.
Many bad options. As you said earlier, sir, there's another thing that's boiling also in the neighborhood of North Korea, which is the South Korea political situation. Uncertainty over South Korea's domestic political scandal certainly adds to tensions in the Korean Peninsula. We all understand that South Korean special prosecutor announced the result of their 70-day investigation into the President Park Geun-hye today.
Involved in the investigation.
Uncertainties to tension on the peninsula. South Korean special prosecutors have announced the results of their 70-day investigation. As you can see, they say Park did it, in fact, collude with their friend to receive bribes from the Samsung Group. Of course, those are ongoing, and therefore it puts a question to Mr. Walsh, the capabilities of the South Korean president at this point, and also the possibility of gearing up nationalism even further to distract the pressure coming from the public about the political scandal. That's all understood. It's a part of the politics, isn't it? Mr. Walsh, can any others help South Korea on their own domestic political chaos? For example, ally United States?
No, absolutely not. This is something that the South Koreans have to sort out from themselves, and if the U.S. were to try to help them, I think that would only cause a backlash and be unproductive. My concern here, I think you point to one possibility, which is this becomes a topic of the presidential campaign that brings out greater nationalism. I'm just sort of concerned that they're going to go through this process. That means we don't have a fully staffed leader in South Korea right now who could be consulting with President Trump. So we're sort of, someone's missing in the lineup, if you will. We have an important batter who's missing from the game. And then when they do enter the game, they're not going to have a lot of experience, presumably. They'll be fresh to this job. And so you'll have new leadership in South Korea and new leadership in the United States at a time when I think I would prefer more seasoned and experienced leadership. And as far as U.S. strategies go, they're discussing all sorts of things. I think none of them are likely to help. They're discussing reintroducing nuclear weapons into South Korea. I think that's a terrible idea and certainly isn't going to stop the North Koreans from their tests. There are other robust, more muscular options they're looking at. I would hope that they look at negotiations. The North Koreans have said to me that they didn't like Obama, but once the page was turned, they'd be willing to talk to the Trump administration. I think we have a negotiator-in-chief. They should try to, whether it's through the six-party talks or elsewhere, try to begin some negotiations.
Well, if you want to do talks, you have to have at least a bit of quietness for at least a few days or a few weeks before that could happen. But we've seen one incident after another over the past few days and weeks. The missile launch also happened after the Malaysian government, as we understand, on Saturday gave Ambassador Chang Kang-cho 48 hours to leave the country as he refused to apologize for his serious accusations over Malaysia's handling of the death of Kim Jong-un, the half-brother of DPRK's leader. The February the 13th killing has already caused a strain in relations between Malaysia and the DPRK. Late February, Malaysia recalled its ambassador from Pyongyang. Malaysia has also revoked visa-free entry for DPRK citizens starting on Monday. In response, on Monday, the DPRK declared the Malaysian ambassador to Pyongyang has persona non grata and demanded the envoy leave the capital within 48 hours from 10 a.m. on Sunday. Okay, all things are moving to the negative side. Mr. Zhang, here's the thing. It seems that the DPRK has cornered itself by what they earlier considered as proactive steps into something of a very difficult situation that nobody could even help them to come out unless themselves really try. Senior Captain Zhang, China is the neighbor of DPRK. China also still believes the friendship, traditional friendship with DPRK for decades. And if DPRK into chaos, all neighbors gonna suffer, including China. So, Senior Captain Zhang, at this point, what messages can China convey to DPRK?
Well,
will they listen?
Well, really, after the death of North Korea leader's half-brother, North Korea has, it seems, North Korea has isolated itself more.
Because Malaysia was one of the countries that really has interaction with DPRK.
Yes,
that's
yes.
right.
China, I think China can give North Korea some advice, but I think North Korea has carried out an independent foreign policy. China, I don't think China has much influence on North Korea, just as the outside world thinks. Or the outside world always thinks that China can exert much pressure on North Korea, but it is not true. So they rely too heavily on China to give pressure on North Korea. But really, China can give some advice to North Korea, and China really hope that the situation on the Korean Peninsula will be calm. This is in the interest of China, but also in the interest of North and South Korea.
We have already heard some specific news going on the border between DPRK and China. For example, some of the soldiers escaping DPRK coming to China's land, into China's borders, and also we don't know what happened with that. All of these stories could be ongoing because it is a border. We are next to each other. Mr. Paul, you know China's policy very well. You work with your Chinese counterparts for decades. At this point, can U.S. and China be able to work it out, some kinds of framework with the DPRK involvement? I mean, China has been, Mr. Paul, the translator, in a way, between DPRK and the rest of the world. Understanding their political system and where they came from originally. And also China now, of course, for decades opened up to the rest of the world. So China knows both worlds. But as China develops, also bigger players into international systems, it is becoming ever more challenging for China to play that role. Mr. Paul, therefore, where is the common ground, you think, strategically, China and U.S. can work together?
Well, I think that the persistent development of nuclear weapons against China's interests by North Korea has closed the distance between American interests on the Korean Peninsula and China's. They should be closer together now. There is a discussion of an early meeting between President Trump and President Xi. I hope that this will get on the schedule soon. A top issue, as always in our discussions, but never more so than today, is how to coordinate our interests and Chinese interests in ways that put real pressure on North Korea to adjust its policies. Now, China gave it a great shot in the six-party talks through 2005, 2008. We made a lot of progress, we thought, but then it turned out the North just is not going to give up those nuclear weapons. We need to acknowledge that fact and then find means that meet the interests of both the U.S. and China.
All right.
There are ways of talking through this so that what happens in North Korea does not become a threat to China, but actually improves Chinese security.
Senior Captain Zhang, of course, China has its own version of challenges and concerns in playing a bigger role. One is what's happening with South Korea with the THAAD deployment and many other things, China's own security. The other is what's going to happen between China and the United States, whether China is the ultimate target of others, any strategic move. Senior Captain Zhang, how is China going to be carefully make this balance? Very briefly from you.
Well, it is true that both the deployment of the U.S. THAAD system in South Korea and also the nuclear programs and also the missile programs of North Korea are not in the interest of China. So China hopes such kind of things can diminish, but things will not go as China thinks. So in the future, I think first China will talk with North Korea about their nuclear programs and also the missile programs, and then we will talk with South Koreans and also maybe United States about the deployment on the Korean Peninsula.
Well, we'll see whether that's really likely to happen. Mr. Walsh, we only have 30 seconds left for you. I'm sorry, sir, but certainly your final words as well, Mr. Walsh.
Yeah, I think that China and the U.S. have some common interests here. I think it's going to be very difficult. Tian, I think you put your finger on it. The Chinese and the North Koreans have a very tough relationship right now. And ironically, if that relationship is poor, it's actually more difficult to get progress because, as you said, the North Koreans have backed themselves into a corner. So I think we're in for a difficult transition right now.
It seems everybody is now feeling comfortable right now. There must be something wrong. And there must be something that we can find as common ground to make things better. Every party, including the DPRK as well. Zhang Junshe, Jim Walsh, Douglas Paul, thank you so much.